thank you so much and welcome everybody. I have just a couple of slides, and then if the NENA website is happy and working and hasn't been overloaded again like it was yesterday, then I'll just show you some of the key elements of our course. I'm actually really excited to share information about this course. Probably 2 years ago or even longer, when the Education Hub started to have some initial chats, we identified very early on that playing a part in changing the way education focuses on the economic system is deeply important. And from this session, you know, it's terrific. We're going to hear from Phil and his work in high schools, and Sitzel and their work, I guess, at the tertiary level. And so from the very early days of developing NENA, we were very interested in how we might offer a broader range of ideas about the economy. And we were hearing a lot of feedback from students and professionals or academics and researchers that the economy or economic courses at university level were still fundamentally focused on the old system, neoclassical economics, what Kate Raworth would say as, you know, the 19th century drawings, the 19th century thinking, even though many of those ideas were early 20th. So long story short, earlier this year, or actually might have been the end of last year, Joe and I started to chat about if we were going to do a range of NENA activities, perhaps one of them could be linked to Griffith University's Yunus Centre, which Joe will very kindly talk a lot more about. And I'm really excited because it was an opportunity to sit back and really think about what we wanted to share with people as being the new economy, and how could we think about bringing experts from our network in to share the love, so to speak. So the lovely image here is the promo material that I put together on, I think we did use Spark Adobe, and we called it a foundational course for building economic systems that support ecological health and social justice. And in case anyone's wondering, the reason why I ended up with building a well-being economy rather than a new economy is possibly an interesting story, because when Bronwyn and I first hosted the conference in 2016 that started to develop an idea for a civil society coalition, we realized that there were a lot of people already in a kind of alternative to neoclassical economics camp. Social solidarity, Center for a Steady State Economy, ecological economics, diverse economies, community economies, sharing economies, collaborative economies. And the only way we could see a way to bring everyone together was to use a different framing. And in the end, we stuck with new, because in the US, we've got New Economy Coalition. In the UK, we had the New Economy Organisers Network. However, 2 years later, when Bob Costanza came to the NENA conference in Brisbane, and we were chatting about the emergence of this international network called the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, it struck me that if we'd had the wellbeing framing in 2016, NENA might well have become WENA, or something far more delightful in terms of an acronym. And the well-being framing, and this is just from my own personal opinion, seems to be a very helpful framing at the moment, because the international network of people who have been pushing everything from donut economics to shifting away from GDP and such values are having some good runs on the board. The New Zealand wellbeing budget, Iceland and Scotland as governments are actually now working with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, people like Catherine Trebeck, Kate Raworth and others, to really shift an understanding of what the economy is for. So I wanted to share that story because I think this is the beginning of us really framing up and talking about what it is we're standing for. But I still love the NENA name because we're all fond of NENA, and new is exciting. People engage with that framing really well. I apologize. I just wanted to acknowledge country. I feel uncomfortable if I don't do it whenever I speak publicly, but I did the acknowledgement for the whole conference this morning, but just wanted to share with you, these are some beautiful water lilies that are in Nudginunda, which is Black Duck Waterhole nearby where I live in North Brisbane. I'm on the traditional lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people, and just want to acknowledge elders past, present and future. And also relevant to this talk and relevant to the work within the course, a focus within NENA on solidarity with First Peoples, but also acknowledging and working within a decolonising framework, which is very important. So acknowledging country and acknowledging colonisation and the long ongoing impacts, and our challenge to really make ourselves truly connected to this place is very important to me. But in simple terms, what is it that we're talking about if we want to, as NENA, start sharing ideas with others about how we change the problems in our current economic system? This is a very simple definition, and it's not great. I think we can do better, but I use this in our course because somebody else, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, uses it, and they're having really good runs on the board in terms of bringing these concepts into people's minds and hearts. So well-being economy can be described as an economy that distributes wealth, prioritizes health and well-being, while stewarding resources for present and future generations. And I would say present and future generations of all of life on Earth, not just human beings. And it's an economy in service to people and planet. So the course, and I'm going to run you through the bits and pieces of it in a moment before I hand over to Joe. The course has 32 participants, and we can be happy to disclose we needed 15. We really needed 15 to show that this little pilot project, and Joe will talk about the challenges and how we had to work between an NGO like NENA and a university structure. So to have 32 participants, and I think they've all paid $324, that includes GST, for an 8-week course. And I don't know about Joe, but I am so excited every Wednesday night because the group are amazing. Everyone is in a very diverse areas. From one young woman works in multicultural, I think it's housing and refugee support. We have people from the Lord Mayor's office in Melbourne. We have folks from a whole range of well-established organisations. And in
Commonwealth government.
Yes, yes.
All sorts.
Yeah, it's been remarkable, and I was almost intimidated when I saw some of these people. I think many of them know more about the formal economic system than I ever will. But what I wanted to do, sorry, I wanted to just jump to the website if it's happy to talk to me. I think it is wonderful. She's had a little bit of a nervous breakdown yesterday, our little website. So on our NENA website, you'll see we have one dedicated page, and this is the lovely poster talking about building the course. And what we've framed it as is within the UNIS framing, and again, Joe will speak more to this, it's a community education frame, but also professional development. And I think I typically refer to it as a professional development course with an opportunity to have a digital badge, which again, Joe will talk about. But what I did want to show you was really just this part, which is what are we going to do in it? What are we doing? And again, I'll admit I had to put a lot of this together pretty quickly on the fly because I've had a very, very busy year. But nonetheless, it's coming together really nicely. I'm sure we'll find ways to improve it and make it better if we have opportunities to do similar ones in the future. But the guidelines from Joe were an 8-week course, aiming for 1 hour of prep or pre-reading, pre-watching before a 2-hour live class on a Wednesday night. And that our participants would be able to engage with some material beforehand, and then a really nice way to give short summaries of that material with our guest speakers or ourselves, and then have some discussion. So the 8 weeks focused on, the first week was brilliant. We had Mary Graham and Hayden Washington and Joe Mcneill. So we focused on different schools of economic thought, and that framing was possibly one of the most important elements of the course, just reminding people how many other ways to think about the economy there are and going back to basics. And then what I might just do is, I'm not going to read all of this, but I just want to respect the speakers. So week 1, different schools of economic thought. Week 2, ownership, property, commoning and co-ops. We've had Louise Crabtree, Jose Ramos and Anthony McMullen blowing people's minds by really critiquing these underpinning private property and property-based structures of capitalism, showing different ways of thinking about the commons, and then Anthony talking very specifically about the role of cooperatives in really challenging the notion of ownership, sharing, and how to work together. So that was really cool. And then the social justice, equity, and decolonizing week was brilliant. I'm sure many of you have heard of Yin Paradis. If you haven't, rope him into some of the stuff you're doing and get him to give one of his super efficient and really empowering talks about decolonization and challenging modernity. And he's got this amazing cultural background, including Indigenous, Chinese, and I think Irish. So he comes from a very Indigenous worldview, but with a really powerful, succinct way to summarize what decolonizing looks like, what indigenizing is and what it looks like, And then Ingrid Burkett spoke about some really incredible frameworks to really think through social justice and other aspects of the economy. And I won't speak to each one as quickly. We've just had our energy evening, and I invited a colleague of mine, Brendan Mackey, from the Climate Change Beacon. They keep changing the name. Griffith Climate Change Response Program originally, now the Climate Action Beacon. And we went back to basics. You know, what are fossil fuels? Why have they been so profoundly significant in the powering up of the European Industrial Revolution? And where has that left us today? And then another fabulous colleague from 20 years ago, Felicity Stenning, now happens to be the CEO of Innova Energy, and their story about responding to the Bentley blockade and building their own community response to energy, and her ability to share with people the details of the electricity sector. So by being able to give big picture critique and then follow it up with our practitioners, you know, folks who are on the ground doing the stuff, like April Crawford-Smith could talk about solar gardens. I just think it's fantastic. I'm having a ball. We're getting some really great feedback from people. And so coming along, we've got work, food, housing, and then law reform and regulation. And so the ultimate goal could be, I think my dream would be to have courses like this, able to empower people to see the big picture, critique the big picture, be part of thinking through solutions, and lots of wonderful examples. I think it's a nice way to excite people. I think Wardy said this morning in his opening remarks. We do feel like the world is full of doom and gloom many days, many times. And one thing that NENA has always offered is a bright, sparkly place to talk about groovy solutions, as well as the problems. And I think this course has been a wonderful experiment. We'll soon see. It's a pilot. I think I'm definitely out of time, aren't I, Jo?
Yeah, time to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jo, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm Jo Mcneill. I am a NENA member, and I've been involved in all of the conferences, I think, except for the Perth one last year. And including with various people on this call, like Stephen Healy and I have given presentations at past conferences, and Bronwyn Morgan and I have worked together over the years, and Sitzel and Anne and I have worked together. So that feels like a nice family reunion going on here. So when I took up my position at Eunice Centre at Griffith University, substantively at the start of this year, but was working with them previously the year before as well, my goal there is to try and look at how we can use the systems and structures of something like a university as an institution to kind of enable more engagement with new economy work, diverse economy work, community economies, and to actually sort of break apart some of that thinking that gets so kind of bogged down in some of these areas, but particularly because my kind of expertise areas is in social innovation. I'm particularly keen on using existing structures and frameworks and kind of tools and processes to kind of try and Trojan horse things into the system that aren't necessarily going to be welcome by the front door, if you like. And so the Eunice Centre at Griffith, I just thought I'd start with a little bit about that, because why that's a good fit, because I'm working there with a fantastic team of people, including the person that I had worked with previously, and where the collaboration came about from my perspective with Professor Ingrid Burkett. And we have a small but growing team of people working in this area. Our focus, we talk about impact-led innovation. So that language I found quite challenging at first. So in the session I'll give after lunch this afternoon, I'll talk a little bit more about that kind of orientation and what that means for us and why we do that. But I'm not going to go into that too much now. If someone wants to challenge that language, we can take that into discussion later on. But basically the purpose is to try and equip people with know-how and navigate change and create positive impact. So we talk about mission-led, we talk about doing that in the sort of Mariana Mazzucato way of doing that, where you actually put the impact first rather than the kind of institutional or organizational form or its need to be sustainable itself. It's all about what is the actual impact that's being created, and who does that? Well, that can be done in lots of different ways. So our focus is on new models of innovation and entrepreneurship economy, and we really focus on the bridge between academic and practice. So we're really focused in the research area, which I do most of my work, is very much action research. It's not the kind of pure academic research. We don't chase ARC grants or anything like that. And we're looking to support innovation through making more visible what's going on, but also through conducting and running demonstration projects is the way that we talk about them, and then using that to develop sort of provocation style insights and knowledge that can help to hopefully prod and poke and prompt different ways of thinking or engaging with some of these issues. So we're part of the business school, which is an interesting framing as well, and we're based on the Logan campus, although not this year obviously, but that's in the south west of Brisbane. It's a kind of a similar to a Western Sydney type of a positioning, if you're familiar with that. And but we're working across Griff as a multi-campus site, and we work at local, regional, national and international scales. So just a little bit on the impact side. As I said, we talk about impact economy and mission oriented or mission led, which is about putting the purpose at the front and center. So we see that as a really practical strategy for actually broadening out who already is, who can, and who will maybe be enticed to participate in actually bringing about some of these new economy aspirations. And for me, in terms of my own work, it actually connects really well. And that's where I started to kind of go, okay, I think I can live with this, to the work I've done around diverse economies over the years with Stephen Healy and others here. So it's all about sort of keeping the focus really tightly on what's the change that we're trying to see, and how do we do that, rather than thinking what kind of organisations do we need, and whether, you know, all of these other things that I've been involved in for 20 years or more, but starting to really kind of bring the focus into, okay, what's that going to do for us as society? So there's a bit more information there in those couple of links that I won't go on if people are interested in looking at that. So what does that mean for the education side of things? We are part of a university, so we do have the kind of we're actually about to bust this up for next year, but at the moment in this year we've been operating, we've had a sort of research and teaching and learning and a sort of supporting innovation sort of strands. So we offer formal courses under the university structure. We've got 3 undergraduate ones up and running in the first year, which is Business for Changing the World, Social and Cultural Entrepreneurship, and a work integrated learning one focused on impact. And then at the moment we have 1 postgraduate, which is Innovation for Impact, and that's a subject within the MBA. But what's happening in the university space is it's all being muddled up with the COVID has had a huge impact, and one of the amongst many changes that are happening, one of the things that's relevant for here is about this idea of micro credentials. So universities are starting to go, well, we recognise that people aren't necessarily always wanting to do a full university course that takes X number of years, costs this much, requires this much time commitment, has a particular focus in terms of academia. There's a lot of people out there who are interested in learning and they're interested in what they can, how they can apply that into their own lives, but they don't, they want to do it in a different way. So a lot of the universities are introducing micro credentials, which are sort of little chunk bite-sized courses, and that has some positive and some negative implications. Again, I won't talk about that now. We can talk about it in questions if people are interested. And so, but a lot of the universities, and ours as well, to be honest, is very focused on the kind of executive education end of that, because they're all seeing it as a money spinner, basically, not to put too fine a point on it, but it's like, let's put some micro credentials out there that we can sell to the executives and, make an extra bit of money on the side kind of thing. I kind of looked at it and went, okay, not really interested in that too much, although, we'll probably do some of that over time, and there's some potential to do some really targeted stuff in there. But I'm interested in how we use that structure and that current sort of, being completely over, the universities are just beside themselves at the potential for this kind of a format. And so how can we take that and use that to do something that we want to do? How can we use that to help get all of the fabulous people that I know are out there, and through NENA and other networks I'm involved in Australia and overseas, who have such wonderful, deep knowledge and expertise and skills available, but they're kind of locked up and only accessible to certain cohorts who are a lot of the time the already inculcated, the sort of, we're all in furious agreement sort of crowd, which is great and it deepens our knowledge, but how do we also expand that out? How do we get others enrolled in the task of bringing about change in this area? And what can these structures that this institution's got, with all the resources and backing it's got behind it, how can we use those to do some of that? So that's kind of where my starting point with it. And that's a key characteristic of an innovation approach, is take what we call a sort of bricolage approach, taking what's there and repackaging it into new and different ways, and reconfiguring it so you can do different things. It's what my colleague Ingrid Burkett calls part of the boring revolution, which is not the kind of massive, disruptive, high profile, shiny, glossy one that everyone wants to have their photo taken with. It's the let's use incremental change through the system structures and actually sort of piece by piece actually work away on some of the more kind of fundamental aspects and see what we can do with them. So all of that led to thinking, okay, let's do an experiment with this digital badge program. And so I started thinking about that. And part of it was also our interest in wanting to facilitate transformative learning. If we're going to do these kind of learning things, we want to see people taking steps, doing something with it. It's great to sit and listen and fill our heads up with wonderful information, and there's so much out there these days, like I can't personally keep up with it, but what do people do after that? How does it actually make a difference to them? So thinking about all that, I was like,
sorry Jo, just 1 minute if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. I'll be very quick. Sorry, I thought okay. I had a little bit longer. So I went to Michelle and said, what do you think? Shall we do an experiment and pilot something with NENA and see if we can actually see how this could work? So that's what we've been doing this year. The digital badge process is quite technical, so I won't go through that blow by blow, but this is the little badge they get, that lovely red and black thing. It comes digitally, so they can attach it to things like their CVs and their LinkedIn profiles. We've purposely kept the assessment part quite low because it's, as Michelle said, we've put it through, and that's part of how we managed to navigate those university systems as a community education offering. And we're at the Midpoint evaluation survey now, and those who've responded so far all seem to be interested in earning that digital badge because it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. So if they don't want a digital badge, they don't have to do any of the assessments. They can just take the course and have a great time, and that's fine. But if they want to get a digital badge, they do these few things, and then that helps us to then they'll be able to get that badge. So we're learning from that. There's different options that we can do in the future. And one of them is about nested modules that build on each other, but also potential to expand into things like pathways oriented. So taking people, giving them RPL, recognised prior learning, to get into formal education courses. Not sure about that one yet, but we'll think about it. And one of the things we're doing to actually look at this transformative learning thing is we're using a digital storytelling process where we're asking for volunteers. Again, they don't have to do it, it's up to them. To work with us to record 2 short reflection statements on a video app called Folktale, one on the morning after the last session and one 3 months later, to actually get a sense of, what happened in between and how did that affect your thinking and your actions. And it complements the reflection piece in the assessment exercise, which is all about thinking about what the difference this might make to your life and your work, and how you're thinking and what you might do next. So it's going to feed into our sort of interest for where we go next with this. What we've done so far this year has been sort of what I think of as a sort of an extended webinar type format, but we'd like to kind of go to something because we're learning a lot. It is a pilot. We've pitched it completely as a pilot on all fronts. And so, how do we kind of step up the engagement level with what we're doing next as well. So yeah, sorry if I went slightly over, but that's the story.